Don't close the book, I got more to write. You can change the story, that is my advice. I read in color, they see black and white. You just saw
I think people should know a little bit about your backgrounds and what angle you're coming from, where you're coming from. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, very briefly.
Well, I was born in Jamaica. Do you want my full life history?
No.
Born in Jamaica, came here when I was 6. I grew up in the church. I grew up in the Church of God Apostle. Stopped going to church probably in my late teens, 18, 19, thereabouts, when I started to delve more into Black history and a real understanding of self. But in terms of what motivates me, like James, I'm motivated by truth. And so this is why this discussion is so important, because James has touched on a lot of very important points, including the political agenda of those who do not love us, those who do not love us, people of melanated skin. And in terms of the image of Yeshua, I prefer to refer to Jesus Christ as Yeshua, because for me, that I'm not coming from a Christian perspective. I'm coming from the truth perspective.
So for anyone who doesn't know why you refer to him as Yeshua, why do you use that name?
Because that would have been his proper name. There was no J in the Hebrew language, so his proper name would have been Yeshua ben Joseph, Yeshua the son of Joseph.
Okay.
That's the proper Hebrew description for the man that we're talking about. The political agenda, the truth-centered agenda, in terms of why certain peoples prefer to show the image of Yeshua as a white man is a serious one, because in a sentence, it is about controlling our minds. That's principally what it's about. It's about controlling our minds in order to enslave our minds, and in terms of the time frame, this started around the 15th century. It was a little bit earlier than James mentioned earlier on. It wasn't the 18th, 19th century. It started around the 15th century, because before that, the image of Yeshua was that of a black man, or if you like, the black Madonna child. The image of Mary and Yeshua, or Mary and Jesus, if you like, was that of a black woman child. And I think Joseph touched on this, because the image that the Pope bows down before in the Vatican is that of a black Madonna and child. The reason that Europeans in particular, and possibly Arabs as well, because Arabs started enslaving us before Europeans did, the reason that the Europeans did this was to enable them to make it easier to enslave us when slavery started by the Europeans in the around the 15th century.
So you're saying this was a premeditated thing?
Of course it was. Absolutely premeditated. And the reason for that, as I say, they could not be enslaving people when the image that they worshipped of God was that of a black man or a black woman, black Mary and child. So they had to change the image. James mentioned the image of God, the painting on the Sistine, scene in the Sistine Chapel. That again was originally supposed to be a black representation, but that was changed to a white God, actually reaching out to a white man, because again, they couldn't have the image of God as a black individual, because they couldn't then have the excuse to enslave black people. So that's where it stems from, essentially. But it's also, I want to say this very, very plainly, it's also about blasphemy, because the white Christian church is about blasphemy. Because when you represent the image of supposedly the Son of God as a white man, you're telling a lie. James touched on this, because if we go back to the original colour of the Hebrews, certainly would not have been a white person. There was no such thing as the Middle East, by the way, James. The area of the land that Yeshua would have come from,
Asiatic.
You could refer to it as Asiatic, but it was actually northeast Africa. It is around where Israel is, the so-called land of Israel is now, is essentially northeast Africa. People refer to the area as Middle East to confuse people. These are further lies that we are constantly told by the white media. Sorry, you're good.
So I just want to touch, because you've geographically given us a point of reference. What do the people typically from that area originally look like?
Right. Well, another good question, because you see, the original Hebrews would have been African people.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Israel, I went to Israel in 2003. The original people of that land are black. They still live there, but you don't see them on the media. The original people of Palestine, for example, you hear this nonsense about Palestinians being Arabs fighting Israel for control of the land. The original Palestinians were Africans. Again, when you go to Israel, you meet the original Palestinian people, and they're black. But the media doesn't show you this. So the original Hebrews were black people. And listen, we shouldn't be afraid to say this.
Mm.
If Jesus existed, and I know from a Christian perspective, that is the belief, then he must have been a black man. So I'd be very happy to say Jesus is black.
So before you say that, because you say if Jesus existed, now you've brought another thing into the debate.
Okay.
So I want to just I want to basically iron that out right now, because we can't have a debate with someone who believes he does and someone who doesn't.
Yes, you can. Because as James said, you can agree to disagree.
You can agree
Very
to
truthful
disagree,
statement.
but what you're saying is that if he existed, then he would be a black man, or he would have been a black man. Do you believe he existed?
I believe that there was someone that existed that was named Yeshua ben Joseph,
Okay.
who many people refer to as Jesus Christ. I believe that person existed.
Okay, that's fine.
That he was the Son of God is another issue.
Okay, so no, because you said that you grew up in the Christian church, and you came away from it when you started to explore the truth, which took you on a journey of studying your history, your black history, but has taken you away from the faith, I'm assuming, from what you're saying?
Well, it's taken me away from Christianity.
Christianity.
It's not taken me away from a belief in God.
Right.
For me, you don't have to be a Christian to believe in God. Of course, I know that the audience says predominantly Christians, so won't take my perspective for that. But let's just agree to disagree for a moment.
Yep.
You don't have to be a Christian to believe in God.
Mm.
And if you go back before Christianity, and to touch on the point again that James made, the first Christian church was a black church. Christianity is a black religion. It came out of a black belief system. The oldest Christian church is the Ethiopian church, as James said, which was started around 4th century. So, in a sense, Christianity is a black religion, but it was taken over by white people, taken over by Rome initially, and later on by other Europeans, and so it is now controlled by white people. And this is one of the reasons you have the images of Yeshua as a white man, because that is again used as psychological warfare to encourage black people to think that God must be white, because if you're portraying the Son of God as white, then it suggests that God himself must be white, which is serious psychological damage.
Yeah.
And I think you've both, I think we can agree that you both agree that it was a political agenda. James, on what level would you agree or disagree with what Simon has said in terms of, based on what you just said?
I should take the mic. Thank you, Simon. Well, the point that I can remember, I can remember it, when you were saying in terms of it started earlier in terms of planting the seeds when it comes to changing our minds and the mind control. When I talk about the 18th century, 19th century, I was talking more then about the social construct of race. I wasn't talking so much about the mind control and the media being used, because Sistine Chapel was done in the 15th century, and then you've got the other one, which is the Last Supper, which was done back then as well. So I get that the seeds were planted hundreds of years earlier. Totally agree with that. I also wanted to make clear that I agree with you when you say that you don't need to be a Christian to believe in God. Now, some of you might think, why would I agree with that? Because to me, God is not specific. God is more than us. God is not even a name of a personal being. God is just relating to something that's higher than us. But you do need to be a Christian to believe in Jesus Christ. Or Yeshua. Or Yeshua Mashiach. Or, there's different names for him. And again, I'm not hung up on these names personally. If you believe in the one who really is and he makes that change in your heart, we see that by evidence, then I know you believe in the one who's Jesus and who he claims to be. Now I know there's all the whole thing changed about the names and how the Greeks have changed it, I get all that. But for me, again, it's going beyond just the label. Yeah, you might rep his name, you might say Yeshua, but you still don't live like how you're supposed to live. So, in many respects, I'm not to knock it, but sometimes we get too caught up on some of these labels and don't live out what we're actually saying we live out. In terms of some of the history you was mentioning about Israel and the black, I don't know, I haven't been there. I've seen different sides of it, but it wouldn't surprise me, even if we went further back, when you think about how the blackness in the Bible, like Cush is mentioned right there in Genesis, on one of the rivers going around the Cushite. Cush, last time I checked, Cush was Africa. Yeah, so I get the Middle East thing as well, because you got countries that have names now, that wasn't the name of the country if you went back enough years, so I get there's all those changes, but sometimes again we have to look underneath. If it's still the same land space we're talking about, then it's not really the issue. The issue is more about what happened at the time, what happened then. So actually a lot of the points that you've made, I totally agree. I just probably would have said them different. Yeah? But the whole thing about God, I agree, but it's true, because everyone can say I believe in God, yeah, so what? Who's your God?
So that's an interesting question.
We've got different perspectives in terms of Christianity, because I believe that he's real. Do you see what I mean? But I just want to put that out there to say some points I probably might disagree with, because, or even take a step further, and I'm just going to add to that when he said about the mind control, and that's part of the reason that pushed the agenda when it comes to slavery. If that's right. I actually think it was more than that, because there was commerce behind it. You have to remember slavery was about money too. And free labour off the back of men who were better slaves than the Irish and the Indians who they tried it with already, and it never worked. As well as it did with Africans, so the Europeans thought, woo, we're onto one here, let's get more of these Africans. So actually, it covered many spectrums. That wasn't just to do with, we want to control their minds. It was more than that. It was about, let's make some money. Let's build a free nation, the new world. So some of it, I'm disagreeing, but I'm disagreeing because I'm thinking it goes even further than that. And maybe if you had time to explain, you could say, yeah, I agree, well, but I just want to put some of that stuff out there. So we're not actually too much in a different part, but we might mention it in different ways. Does that make sense? So that's what
yeah. What would you say, oh, yeah.
Hello?
Would you say that it's justifiable to tell those that feel this way to just get over it? Somebody comes up to you, I'm going to direct this at you, James, right now, but in terms of...
Sorry, can I just quickly say, I agree with what James just said.
Okay.
In terms of the last perspective, the economic perspective,
Right.
the use of white Jesus.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad.
You come expecting to see a fight.
But this is
I mean, some parts will probably, because he said the Son of God part, meaning we'll definitely disagree on that one. But we're not here to discuss that tonight, it's a different topic. But everything probably will fall out of this for a later time.
Yeah.
But I think it's key to say as well that we are staying on topic because we've got short time. And some of the things, we're going to agree on. But so you wanted to ask me something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something, and I just wanted to add to that and say, yes, this is a rolling discussion, because I don't think this cannot get solved in one night, if it can get solved at all. I was saying, is it justifiable to tell those that approach you with the feeling, you talk to someone about the faith, or that they've got questions, and they say, but this was a white man's religion, to say to them, well, just get over it. What does it matter anyway? I've heard that said before. So is that something that you would condone? You would say that's okay, yeah, it's okay to say that, or is that something that you probably wouldn't agree with?
Before, I would have agreed with it. And it's easy for me to say, being in that position, because I'm thinking, it's just about Christ, it's not about colour. Now, no. because psychologically speaking, culturally speaking, yeah, it does matter. And for some people, they're not where I am. So for me, just to throw it out and say, it doesn't matter, get over it, because for me, I'm thinking I can see beyond that. I'm not helping them, am I? Really?
No.
So no.
No. So no. Would you agree with that, Simon?
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a sort of expression that a lot of people use when they don't want you to acknowledge the history, to acknowledge truth.
Is it an expression they use when they don't know the history themselves?
Sometimes. But I mean, for example, the common way that is used is, in terms of slavery, you know, it happened hundreds of years ago, get over it. The reality is that still affects us today, whether we recognize it or not. And we still carry within our genes those experiences that our ancestors went through starting 500 years plus ago. We still carry that trauma within our genes. And the sad thing is that not enough of us recognize that reality. Because, I mean, we touched on with James earlier on about how we actually deal with some of these issues. You know, the black on black crime, this, that, and the other. We deal with it by healing ourselves, starting to heal ourselves. Now, you can do that in a Christian perspective if you so wish, but the reality is we have trauma brought down transgenerationally that we haven't dealt with, and we need to recognize that. There is a reason why there are so many issues within the black community, within the black family. That's one of the reasons I touch on this. I focus on the family program on Islam Radio, because there are so many issues that we still need to deal with, and we need to deal with it, if not only for our own purposes, but for the purposes of our children, because our children are coming up, they want answers to these issues, and sadly, not enough of us are providing those answers. You touched on who should be addressing these issues. It's for parents to address them. You know, it's for so-called leaders to address them. It's brothers like James to address them, but they have to be addressed.
But that goes back to my question earlier, when I asked who should be addressing them. But if the parents don't know, how are they supposed to address them? So everything is blamed on the education system. The education system should be doing this, should be doing that. But like we said, we can't rely on them to give us our history.
That's right.
So there is an element of self-teaching that needs to
Absolutely.
go. From what I'm hearing, it sounds to me like that needs to happen.
Absolutely right. That's how I dealt with it, because when I grew up with my grandmother, she didn't know much about our history. I had to go and find out for myself. So I went to libraries, and in fact, one of the things that sparked my interest in learning more about my history, because sadly, it's not even taught in the black church. It certainly wasn't taught when I was growing up as a child. It wasn't taught in the church. You never saw the image that of a black Yeshua in church. You might see one now. The Reverend Eve has one in her church. Good for her. But like James, in my grandmother's living room was this image of a blonde, blue-eyed, pale creature referred to as Jesus. And I couldn't make any connection with that. So, yes, you're right. Not enough parents know about this. And so you have to teach yourself. You have to do your own research.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
I just want to respond to something Simon said in there, and if I heard it wrong, let me know. But when we think about slavery and the ills of society, and some of the things that go on for like the black on black crime, it sounded to me like you were making a connection between the slavery and some of the ills that we're seeing in our own community. And part of me wants to kind of challenge it in this respect. Is that an assumption then to say that our ills are a direct result of that? Or is that basically making that assumption to direct ill? Does that mean in before slavery, we didn't have ills within our society, or as a community, we didn't have problems? In terms of Africa, black people, our societies, the cultures that are around it. Because if we had them before then, to just lump it all on slavery is actually making it out as though we were something we were not before then. Does that make sense? That's the assumption I'm hearing built into it, and I suppose that's why I just wanted to ask that question, because obviously we had a history long before. Let's be honest. We had a history long before. I mean, nobody agree on that. Long before slavery. Yeah, and if we're only taught our history from slavery, then psychologically that has a detrimental effect on us, because for many of us it starts at slavery, which is nonsense. Nonsense. So, and I know I don't want to get too much into the slavery thing, but we're always going to touch on it with this topic. But for me then, and maybe this is my Christian worldview coming in as well in terms of the corruption of just humankind generally, forget colour. For me, every pocket has problems and issues for different reasons. And I just wanted to bring that balance in and say that, I mean, you can respond clearly, but that's something I wanted to throw out there because I've heard it before. And it's almost like if we could kind of know what we did then, we could undo that and be who we was before. But actually, we were warring and things were going on. So I don't know, I just want to see what you have to say to that. I just throw it out there.
We are going to have
Simon,
sorry.
Simon to share.
You're absolutely right, James.
Before you do that, Simon, I just want to hold that point. I just want to let the audience know that we are going to have open the Q&A session shortly. So hold on to your questions and please.
I was agreeing with James on that point. I'm not suggesting that before the Europeans came onto the continent of Africa, that beautiful motherland, and started to enslave us, that Africa was utopia, as James has hinted at. There were still wars in Africa, but you never had the sort of horrors that African people experienced, as they did under European enslavement. I'm going to just elaborate on that briefly, because you had, to some extent, with Arab slavery, which preceded European slavery. Yeah. But the continent of Africa was not a utopia. So there were certainly ills, but the reality is that when we came into contact in this horrific way, Europeans, whether you're talking about the French, the British, the Spanish, the Portuguese, they imposed upon us that the mentality that we are less than human, that we are cursed, that we deserve the sort of treatment they were imposing upon us. And clearly that is not the case. We are the mothers and fathers of civilization, humanity. We are the first people on this planet. And the reality is that the people that sought to enslave us had to try and get rid of that reality. And that is why you have these images of a blonde, blue-eyed Jesus.
Do you have a response to that?
No.
Okay. I just want to bring this section to a close before we have a performance and go to the Q&A, and just bring it in slightly to ask, let's suppose, because let's just theoretically suppose in your case, that Jesus is the Son of God, right? That he is God incarnate as man on earth. And he did come and die for our sins. Let's suppose that was exactly the truth. But he wasn't black, he was white, or he was Chinese. But that in itself is the truth. Would this debate still matter? Would it still matter? Would it still be an issue?
There's 2 points there. The issue of Yeshua, Jesus being the Son of God, and the second point, as I understand it.
So I'm asking you, just get into your head, if it was true, because I know you're saying if, you said if earlier, so if you believed it was true that Jesus was the Son of God, but he wasn't necessarily black, would this argument still matter? Would it still be an issue? What if he was actually white? What if he was actually Chinese? And you might have a different perspective, but I just want to throw that out there just to see what your take.
Well, it's a good question, but it's pure hypothesis. The reality is that Yeshua must have been black. We're dealing with truth here. We're not dealing with some theory.
Okay.
But assume for one moment. Let me assume. No offense, Daina. Let me assume for a moment that Jesus is the Son of God. That would be extremely serious, because it would show that, for example, for a start, it would suggest that God must be black. Therefore, that would encourage black people generally, and particularly our children, to have more belief in themselves, to love themselves more, to think that, wow, the person that created me, the spirit that created me is black, just like myself. Imagine the sort of boost to our children's self-esteem, to our self-esteem that would bring. But the opposite is the case, because those who control the images, the media, they want to give you a different image. Theirs is the theory, theirs is the hypothesis, and theirs is a lie and blasphemy. That's my view.
Okay, I threw that question.
Sorry, whilst it's in my mind, because the point was mentioned earlier, that in terms of culture, James, that if you speak a certain way, it's a reflection of the culture. Now, listen, I speak a certain way. It doesn't mean I can't speak Patois when I want to speak Patois. It's not a reflection of the fact that I don't embrace my culture.
Yeah.
I'm probably blacker, I dare to say, most people here.
But let me just make it clear, it's a perception. I'm not saying it's the truth. And it's not just how you speak, but it's my family. But yeah, I agree. It's true.
James, I threw that question out there because I wanted to explore the issue, because you spoke earlier about you're a man about the truth.
Yeah.
And for you, the truth is that Jesus is the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
So if the truth for you is that Jesus is the Son of God, and you might not agree with this, so then would it matter to you what colour he was?
No.
Why?
Because before I came to the faith, before God kicked my door down, when people say God's a gentleman, he asks you, that never happened in my life. He kicked the door down because I wasn't interested. For me, one of the things I remember saying to the Lord is, Lord, just reveal yourself to me. I don't care if you're black, white, green, yellow, and I specifically was like, I don't care which faith, but just reveal yourself to me. That was just my desire. That was just my desire. So if I'm going to be honest to that and faithful to that, that's where I was at, and I'm still there. Because at the end of the day, it's not just the colour that causes the atrocities, it's the heart of the people behind the colour. So it's not like every white person is a devil. It's not like every black man is a man, who's God. Do you see what I'm saying? And I know that's taught, and people believe that. I don't believe that. So it goes beyond that. Now, you might have representations who's at the front, which we get labelled with, like, if I never met an Indian man walking down, like Indians before, and I walk down the road and one of them persecutes me and hurts me and puts me through all sorts of trials, then I might actually end up thinking, you know what, I don't like Indian people. But I'm just generalising of what happened with one. So, for me, we have to be careful with our generalisations, and we tend to do that too easily. So, that's my long way of saying no. To me, it wouldn't matter. If it was the Son of God and he's a white man, blonde hair, he is. That's where I'm coming from. But as you said, and you rightly said, it's a hypothesis, it's just not the truth. It's not the truth.
Thank you. I mean, we have to bring this section to a close, but can we give
Don't close the book, I got more to write. You can change the story, that is my advice. I read in color, they see black and white. You just saw the cover.